You're watching All 24 News World News Program. I'm your host Islam Sid, and up next are tonight's top stories. Angolan President Lourenço touches down in Algeria for a state visit and officially received by President of the Republic Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune at the Mouradia Palace. The two countries affirm strong historic ties and a shared commitment to Africa's causes. The Sahrawi president slams government's back in Morocco's occupation. He blames the Makhzen for the open war and says independence is the only path to real peace. And later on, Trump shoots down Iran's peace proposal, warning the ceasefire is very shaky. Iran insists its offer is legitimate and generous, and the Iranian president says they have three possible paths with America. Welcome back. First off, in our news tonight, Angolan President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço begins a three-day state visit to Algeria on Monday. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, received him at the Algiers International Airport on Monday afternoon. Both leaders listened to the Algerian and Angolan national anthems before reviewing formations of the People's National Army, who presented arms in their honor. A 21-gun salute was fired to mark the occasion. President Lourenço then greeted senior Algerian officials, while President Tebboune welcomed members of the accompanying Angolan delegation. In the presidential lounge of Algiers International Airport, President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, held talks with his Angolan counterpart. The discussions took place in the presence of delegations from both countries. At the Mouradia Palace, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune officially received Angolan President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço. The welcoming ceremony included a review of formations from the Republican Guard, who presented arms in his honor. The Algerian president and his Angolan counterpart then posed for a commemorative photograph in front of representatives of national and international media. Following this, the two presidents greeted the delegations from both countries. The two presidents then proceeded to the presidential hall at the Algerian Presidential Palace. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, held private talks with his Angolan counterpart, President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, at the Mouradia Palace. That was followed by an expanded working session with the participation of delegations from both countries. At the Mouradia Palace on Monday, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune and Angolan President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço oversaw the signing of 11 agreements and memoranda of understanding covering multiple areas of bilateral cooperation. The agreements span investment, vocational training, water resources, postal and telecommunications services, animal health, higher education, the pharmaceutical industry, air transport, and mining and hydrocarbons. Both sides also signed a memorandum of understanding between the Algerian Diplomatic Institute and its Angolan counterpart. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune affirms the political will of Algeria and Angola to establish the foundations of a comprehensive and fruitful strategic partnership. In a joint statement with Angolan President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço on Monday, he reveals an agreement to strengthen cooperation across multiple sectors and develop mechanisms to deepen bilateral collaboration.
هذه الزيارة أتاحت لنا الفرصة لاستعراض واقع التعاون الثنائي وآفاق تطويره، حيث أجرينا محادثات ثرية أكدنا من خلالها إرادتنا السياسية لإرساء أسس شراكة استراتيجية شاملة ومثمرة. وفي هذا الإطار اتفقنا على تعزيز التعاون في قطاعات المحروقات والزراعة والصناعة والصيدلانية والطاقات المتجددة والصحة والرقمنة والتكوين، وتطوير آليات تبادل الخبراء في كل هذه المجالات، سواء عبر اللجنة المشتركة أو عبر مجلس الأعمال المشترك الذي أشرفنا على توقيع اتفاق إنشائه، ليكون فضاءً دائماً لتشجيع الشراكة بين الفاعلين الاقتصاديين.
President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, announced the launch of a direct air route between Algiers and Luanda next July, describing it as a key step to boost exchanges and rapprochement between the two peoples.
وإلى جانب هذا النتائج الهامة في مسار التعاون، أكدت لفخامة الرئيس لورانسو استعداد الجزائر لدعم جهود التنمية في أنغولا، لا سيما في مجال تكوين الإطارات بما يخدم أولوياتنا. وأود في هذه السانحة أن أعرب عن ارتياحي العميق لما توصلنا إليه من اتفاقيات هامة تعزز الإطار القانوني وتفتح آفاقاً جديدة للتعاون. وسيكون تجسيد مشروع خط جوي مباشر بين الجزائر ولواندا أحد أهم الخطوات لدعم المبادلات والتقارب بين الشعبين. وافتتاح هذا الخط الجزائر لواندا سيكون ابتداء من جويي لهذه السنة.
Other regional and international levels, President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, said both countries trust the need to strengthen peace and stability in Africa and boost coordination against shared threats with an African approach based on peaceful solutions and non-interference. He also confirmed agreement on enhancing joint African action and advancing economic integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area and major infrastructure projects to improve continental connectivity.
أما بالنسبة للتعاون على الصعيدين الإقليمي والدولي، فقد أكدنا على أهمية تعزيز السلم والاستقرار في إفريقيا وتكثيف التنسيق لمواجهة التهديدات المشتركة وعلى رأسها الإرهاب والجريمة المنظمة. وفي إطار مقاربة إفريقية تقوم على الحلول السلمية وعدم التدخل، وعبرت في هذه المناسبة وفي هذا السياق عن تقديرنا للدور الفاعل الذي تطلع به أنغولا بقيادة الرئيس لورانسو في مجال الوساطة وتسوية النزاعات، لا سيما في إفريقيا الوسطى ومنطقة البحيرات الكبرى، وتقديرنا كذلك لجهوده خلال رئاسته الاتحاد الإفريقي. ومن جهة أخرى تطرقنا إلى أهمية العمل الإفريقي المشترك ودعم مسار الاندماج الاقتصادي، خاصة من خلال منطقة التجارة الحرة القارية الإفريقية والمشاريع الهيكلية الكبرى التي تعزز الربط والتكامل بين دول القارة.
President Tebboune reiterated both countries' commitment to international law and support for the right to self-determination, including for the Sahrawi and Palestinian peoples, in line with UN resolutions and international legitimacy.
كما عبرنا انطلاقا من تماسكنا باحترام القانون الدولي عن وقوفنا إلى جانب حق الشعوب في تقرير مصيرها، وأقصد الشعبين الصحراوي والفلسطيني، كما نحفظه لهما وتحفظهما لهما قرارات والمواثيق الأممية والشرعية الدولية. وأود في الأخير أن أعبر على تقديري العميق لمشاعر الصداقة التي عبر عنها الرئيس لورانسو تجاه الجزائر من خلال تكريم رموزها التاريخية. وبهذا الصدد أنوه بأهمية تعزيز التعاون في مجال الذاكرة والتاريخ، لا سيما فيما يتعلق بجرائم الاستعمار، بما يسهم في صون الذاكرة وإحقاق العدالة التاريخية.
For his part, Angolan President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço praised Algeria's support since independence, notably in the creation of Sonangol. He reaffirmed Luanda's commitment to strengthening bilateral cooperation and stressed the importance of holding the fourth session of the Algerian-Angolan Joint Commission.
We also highly appreciate Algeria's continued support for Angola since its independence, and we recall that a number of professionals who received their training in Algeria still hold positions within the Angolan oil company Sonangol, including in the management of the institution itself. Therefore, based on the assessment we have conducted, we believe that the current level of cooperation still falls short of our aspirations. Nevertheless, we remain committed to improving the existing situation. In this context, we emphasize the need to convene the fourth session of the Joint Bilateral Commission between the two countries.
A bilateral relationship spanning more than 5 decades, from African liberation struggles to today's strategic challenges. Algiers and Luanda share more than a partnership, a common vision for Africa's development. Zafrajan has more in this report now.
He came to Algeria as a head of state, but for Angola, this visit carries the weight of history, because long before Luanda and Algiers became strategic partners, they were bound by a shared struggle. In the 1960s, Algeria opened its doors to the popular movement for the liberation of Angola. From Algiers, Agostinho Neto and other independence figures organized, trained and defended the dream of a free Angola. Algeria offered political backing, military assistance and a diplomatic platform at a time when anti-colonial movements across Africa were fighting to be recognized. That chapter helped shape a relationship built not only on diplomacy but on memory, a relationship that survived well beyond the liberation era. Today, Algeria and Angola continue to defend many of the same principles on the African stage: respect for sovereignty, rejection of foreign interference, and the belief that African crises require African solutions. Within the African Union, both countries often find themselves aligned on major continental issues, including support for the Sahrawi cause and calls for greater African independence in global decision-making. But this visit is not only about politics or history. It also reflects a growing push to strengthen economic ties between two major African energy producers, seeking a stronger role on the continent. Trade exchanges remain modest for now, with Algerian exports to Angola reaching around $1.33 million in 2024, according to international trade data. Yet both sides are looking for beyond those figures. Over the past 2 years, the two countries have signed around 20 cooperation agreements in sectors ranging from energy to investment, while launching an Algerian-Angolan business council aimed at boosting long-term economic cooperation. As Africa redefines its place in a changing world order, Algeria and Angola appear determined to move forward together, building on decades of political trust while turning their partnership toward new strategic and economic ambitions.
Algerian Prime Minister Saifi said more than 20,000 investment projects worth over $67.5 billion have been registered since the Algerian Investment Promotion Agency began operations in November 2022. Speaking at a media day in Algiers on the new legal framework for the one-stop shop for investment, he said the projects are expected to generate more than 500,000 jobs. He added that the figures reflect renewed confidence in Algeria's investment and business climate.
لقد مكن وضع منظومة الاستثمار حيز التنفيذ.
The implementation of the investment framework has enabled the accumulation of crucial experience, where the figures show real, concrete, and measurable progress, affirming that we are on the right path since these regulations came into force. The Algerian Investment Promotion Agency has registered more than 20,000 projects, with a total declared value exceeding 9,000 billion Algerian dinars, approximately $67.5 billion US dollars, expected to create over 525,000 jobs. These figures are not mere statistical indicators, but undeniable proof of the return of the confidence.
Moving on to another topic on news stories, Sahrawi President Brahim Ghali condemned some governments supporting the Moroccan occupation, calling their positions irresponsible and a diversion from long war against the Sahrawi people. In a letter to the UN Secretary General, he said statements rely on false narratives and violate Western Sahara's decolonization status. He warned that they encourage continued occupation and held Morocco responsible for breaching the 1991 ceasefire.
Those who claim that there is currently a ceasefire in Western Sahara are deceiving themselves and misleading the international community. The Moroccan occupying state violated the 1991 ceasefire on November 30, 2020.
The Sahrawi president said a just and lasting peace cannot be achieved by rewarding Morocco for its expansionist policies or by endorsing its proposal. In a letter to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he stressed that only the defense of the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and independence can ensure a lasting settlement.
Those who sincerely care about stability in North Africa must realize that a just and lasting peace in our region can never be achieved by rewarding the Moroccan occupying state for its exceptionist tendencies and attempts to change borders by force, or by endorsing its colonial proposal. Rather, it can only be achieved by defending the inalienable right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination and independence, which is the only effective path toward a just and lasting peace.
And as you followed in our headlines tonight, US President Donald Trump projected Iran's proposal to end the war, calling it unacceptable and incomplete. Speaking from the Oval Office, he said the ceasefire with Iran had become extremely fragile, warning that negotiations were failing to reach an agreement.
It's a very simple plan. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have a nuclear weapon, and they didn't want to go that far. If you can believe it, they didn't. How stupid? Are they stupid people? They didn't want to believe it. They think that, well, I'll get tired of this, or I'll get bored, or I'll have some pressure, but there's no pressure. There's no pressure at all. We're going to have a complete victory. We've already, in theory, had a complete victory from the military standpoint. The military, look, their Navy is dead. They had 159 ships. Right now they have 0, other than the little speedboats that go around that got taken out 8 a day by us. They have no Air Force. They have no anti-aircraft. Now, they probably put the shoulder jobs into service over the last 3 weeks, probably.
Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai described Tehran's proposal to end the war with the United States and reopen the Strait of Hormuz as legitimate and generous. He said Iran is seeking only to secure its rights and those of its people, accusing Washington of sticking to unreasonable and unilateral demands that undermine negotiations.
Iran demands stopping maritime piracy against Iranian ships, what they have labeled a naval blockade for the release of assets belonging to the Iranian people, which for years have been unjustly frozen in foreign banks because of American pressure. Are these excessive demands? Is our proposal for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz an excessive demand? Is an important issue such as establishing security and peace throughout the entire region, including Lebanon, an irresponsible demand? Therefore, everything that we proposed in our text consisted of reasonable demands, responsible proposals, and generous suggestions, not only for Iran's national interest, but also for the good stability and security of the entire region and the world. However, unfortunately, the American side still insists on its one-sided views and unreasonable demands based on mindsets that are largely shaped by the Zionist regime.
For his part, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said the country faces 3 options: negotiations from a position of strength, a state of neither war nor peace, or continued military confrontation. In his first meeting with police after the war, he said reason and national interests require extending what he called battlefield gains into diplomacy. He also described the war waged by the United States and the Zionist entity against Iran as the most complex and ferocious in decades. Still with the Middle East developments, in Gaza, the health system has been pushed to the brink of collapse. In the south, an ICRC field hospital continues to receive dozens of wounded daily, where doctors and volunteers under makeshift tents are still working to save lives. More details now with Sofian Kanturi.
Under white tents set up in southern Gaza, doctors, nurses, and volunteers work around the clock. Every day, dozens of patients arrive, people wounded in bombardments, children suffering from malnutrition, and elderly civilians exhausted by nearly 3 years of war, displaced and humanitarian collapse. At the center of this emergency, the medical field continues to operate without pause. Built under extreme conditions, the medical facility has become one of the last remaining lifelines of the wounded, a place where medical terms continue trying to save lives despite overwhelming shortages and constant pressure.
So we opened this hospital in May 2024. It's a field hospital. A field hospital is designed to last 6 to 12 months. Ours has been here now for 2 years. So we've stretched the shelf life of our field hospital out of necessity because there is no viable alternative in terms of safe and sustainable access for healthcare for Palestinians in southern Gaza.
Originally designed as temporary structure for a short-term emergency response, the ICRC field hospital is now operating far beyond its initial mission, an extension made necessary by the collapse of Gaza's healthcare infrastructure.
Let's be clear, not enough medical equipment, medical supplies is coming into Gaza. That's why our field hospital exists, to fill a gap in health services available to Palestinian communities, most of them displaced, that live here, right?
In a territory devastated by months of destruction and humanitarian suffering, these white tents standing amid the ruins have become far more than a medical center. They're a final refuge for the wounded, where medicine continues its battle against death.
Elsewhere, and in Lebanon, at least 6 Lebanese were killed and others wounded, including 2 paramedics, in Israeli occupation airstrikes on Nabatiya Governorate since dawn Monday. The health ministry said 2 people were killed in Sibtin when a municipal aid vehicle was hit. while further strikes in Harris and Abba left additional dead, including a woman and child. 2 paramedics were also wounded in Tol when a civil defense team was targeted during rescue operations. Now it is time to catch up on more international news stories in the News in Brief with Salma Nassib this time.
United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk confirmed that 880 civilians were killed in Sudan between January and April of this year as a result of drone attacks. In a press statement issued on Monday, Turk warned of the escalating and widening violence, calling for strict measures to prevent the transfer of weapons to the warring parties, including advanced military drones. China confirmed that U.S. President Donald Trump will visit Beijing next Wednesday for a 3-day state visit. A spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs said on Monday that at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Trump will pay a state visit to China from May 13th to May 15th. Meanwhile, U.S. officials stated that President Trump and his Chinese counterpart are expected to discuss issues related to Iran, Taiwan, artificial intelligence and nuclear weapons as both sides consider extending their critical minerals agreement. Russia authorities accuse Ukrainian forces of launching attacks on the Belgorod Oblast, resulting in the death of 1 person and injuries to 3 people. According to Russia's state-run TASS news agency, citing the governor of Belgorod, 1 person was killed and 3 others were wounded in a Ukrainian attack on the region. The incident comes amid continued exchanges of accusations between Ukraine and Russia over alleged violations of a 3-day ceasefire procured by United States. France Health Minister Stéphane Brest confirmed that the country's first case of hantavirus linked to the outbreak abroad of a Dutch cruise ship, warning that the patient's condition is worsening. Speaking to France Inter on Monday, Brest said 4 other suspected cases tested negative but will be retested, adding that authorities have traced 22 contacts so far. Health officials in Switzerland and the United States also confirmed 2 infections among evacuated passengers. U.S. authorities said 1 tourist tested positive for the virus, while another showed mild symptoms.
That wraps up our news program. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great night.